The room that wasn't there. I never wanted to set foot in that house again. My grandmother's death had been sudden, but the house felt like it had been dying long before she did. The wooden beams groaned as if they carried centuries of secrets. The walls stained with memories no one wanted to recall. It was the kind of place where silence felt heavy, where every breath felt watched. I told myself I was only there to sell it, to clear out the old furniture, fix what needed fixing, and hand it over to the next unlucky owner. But from the first night I knew something wasn't right. The house had always felt off, but I chalked it up to childhood imagination. Now, as an adult, I couldn't ignore the strange details. The floor plan didn't match what I remembered. I knew every corner of that house from years of hiding in it as a kid, but something felt different. My unease grew when I noticed a door in the hallway that I had no memory of. It blended into the wall too perfectly, as if it had been hidden for years. The knob was ice cold, the wood untouched by dust, unlike the rest of the house. I hesitated before turning the handle, a sharp chill running through me. The door creaked open to reveal a room that shouldn't exist. I knew this house inside out, and there was no space for an extra room here. But there it was, a dimly lit chamber, thick with dust, its air stale and heavy. A small wooden table sat in the middle, and on it lay an open notebook. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped inside, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the pages. The handwriting was mine. That made no sense. I hadn't been here in years, and I had never owned a notebook like this. I flipped to the last page, my heart pounding. The date was yesterday. The words made my stomach twist. Do not stay after dark. Do not listen to the whispers. Do not go near the mirror. A shiver crawled up my spine. My mind fought against logic, scrambling for a rational explanation. Maybe my grandmother had kept old letters, maybe. Maybe this wasn't my handwriting at all, just similar enough to make me doubt myself. I shut the book and turned to leave, but the moment my foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me. The air turned thick, pressing against my chest. The dim light in the room flickered, and a whisper curled through the silence. It wasn't from outside. It was here, in the room with me. My breath hitched as I turned toward the mirror hanging on the far wall. It hadn't been there before. I took a step closer, and my reflection did the same. But something was wrong. The me in the mirror wasn't copying my movements exactly. It was delayed, just by a fraction of a second, but enough to be noticeable. Enough to make my skin crawl. Then, it smiled. I didn't. My knees locked, fear digging its claws into my spine. My reflection lifted its hand and waved. My arms stayed at my sides. A deep, suffocating dread wrapped around me as I forced myself to move, to run, but my body felt sluggish, as if the air itself had thickened. The whispering returned, louder now, words I couldn't understand, slipping through the cracks in reality. My reflection's smile widened, stretching too far, teeth too sharp, eyes too dark. Then it spoke. You found the room. That means you're next. I stumbled back, my hand fumbling for the doorknob. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing inward, the air colder. My fingers grasped the handle and twisted desperately, but the door wouldn't budge. The whispering turned into a low, guttural chuckle. Grandma left, and now you're here. It's been waiting. No, this wasn't real. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up, to shake off whatever hallucination had taken hold of me. When I opened them again, the mirror was empty. My reflection was gone. Something moved behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. Just the table, the notebook, the mirror. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and erratic. Then, slowly, the air shifted. A single word scratched against my ears, spoken in a voice that wasn't mine. Run. The door flew open, slamming against the wall. I didn't hesitate. I ran, my feet barely touching the ground as I bolted down the hallway. The walls groaned, the house trembling as if waking from a long sleep. Shadows stretched unnaturally, reaching toward me as I threw myself into the main room. The front door was right there. I lunged for it, yanking it open, just as a cold hand wrapped around my wrist.
A scream tore from my throat as I twisted free, stumbling onto the porch. The moment my feet hit the ground outside, the air shifted. The silence returned. The house stood still, innocent in the moonlight, as if nothing had happened. I gasped for air, my body trembling. My wrist burned where something had grabbed me, an icy imprint lingering on my skin. Slowly I turned back. The house loomed, unchanged. But the front door was closed. I hadn't closed it.
And beneath the last line, a new sentence had appeared. You left, but it followed. Story number 2. Voices in the Vents. I first heard it on my second night in the house. A whisper, faint, like a breath against my ear, slipping through the vents just as I was about to fall asleep. I sat up immediately, my skin prickling. The room was still, the house silent except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Maybe it was the pipes, I told myself, or the wind outside. But then I heard it again. A voice. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, low, hushed, like someone speaking just out of reach. My stomach twisted as I stared at the vent near my bed. It was old, rusted around the edges, the kind of thing that probably hadn't been cleaned in decades. I swallowed hard, leaning closer, my breath catching in my throat. And then the whispering stopped. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until I convinced myself I had imagined it. I was just tired. Moving into a new place always did weird things to the mind, but as I turned off the lamp and lay back down, something scraped against the inside of the vent, not the pipes, not the wind, something inside. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear breathing, soft and deliberate, as if someone was listening to me sleep. By the next morning, I had almost convinced myself it was a small animal, a rat maybe, a bird trapped somewhere in the ducts. It was an old house after all, it made sense, but when I mentioned it to my landlord, an old man with a permanent scowl, he shook his head. "Can't be rats," he muttered. "Had the place checked last month. Nothing in the vents." That should have reassured me. It didn't. That night the whispering started earlier. I had just sat down on the couch when I heard it. A slow murmur seeping through the vents, wrapping around the room like a cold draft. The words were clearer now, but I still couldn't understand them. It sounded like a conversation. Two voices speaking in hushed tones. I turned off the TV, my pulse quickening. The voices stopped. The silence felt thick, expectant. And then, "Can you hear us?" I shot off the couch, my breath coming in short gasps. The voice had been right there, right behind me, sliding through the vent near the floor. My skin crawled as I backed away, my hands shaking. I wanted to believe I had imagined it, that it was my mind playing tricks on me. But then it spoke again. "We know you're listening." I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear them moving. Not just the whispering now, something shifting in the vents, dragging against the metal, slow and deliberate. The next day, I called a ventilation service. The guy showed up in the afternoon, took one look at the vent in my room and frowned. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. "Just a week." He didn't say anything, just pried off the grate and shined a flashlight inside. The moment he did, he froze. His face paled as he stared into the duct, his hands tightening on the edge of the metal. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. Slowly he reached inside, pulling something out, a small crumpled piece of paper. It was yellowed with age, the edges torn. He handed it to me, his expression unreadable. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was scrawled, frantic. "They watch through the vents, they whisper at night. If you hear them, don't respond." My blood ran cold. I looked up at the technician, but he was already packing up his tools. "I don't know what this is, man, but I'd get out of here if I were you," he muttered. That night I pushed a chair against my bedroom door and left every light on. My mind raced with questions. Who wrote that note? How long had it been in there? And if they were warning me, did that mean they had heard the voices too? The whispering started again around midnight, but this time It was different. They weren't just speaking to each other anymore. They were calling my name. The sound was everywhere, threading through the vents, filling the room with a chilling presence. My body was frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. And then, just as the panic reached its peak, the vent cover rattled. I bolted upright, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The metal screws twisted on their own, slowly unscrewing. The grate loosening. The thing inside was trying to come out. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a lamp, and backed into the corner of the room. The grate clattered to the floor, and for a split second, all I saw was darkness. Then fingers. Long, thin fingers, too many of them, unfolding from the shadows inside the vent. They were pale, almost translucent, stretching toward me, grasping at the air. A whisper curled through the room, soft and teasing. "Found you." I didn't think. I just ran. I tore through the house, slamming doors behind me, heart pounding as I fumbled with the locks. Something moved behind me, the whispers turning into raspy laughter. The last thing I saw before I stumbled out into the cold night was the vent in the living room, wide open, something shifting inside. I never went back. I broke my lease, left my belongings, and never looked at that house again. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. "You left too soon. We weren't done talking." I threw my phone across the room. The number was disconnected when I tried to call back, but that night in my new apartment, I froze as the air vents rattled. And then the whispering started again. Story number 3. The Stalker in the Walls. I should have trusted my instincts the first time I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from inside the walls. It was subtle at first, the kind of noise you could blame on old pipes, shifting wood, maybe even mice. But it wasn't mice. And the moment I realized that, it was already too late. I had moved into the house alone, renting it for cheap after the last tenant left in a hurry. The landlord barely said a word when handing me the keys, just muttered something about keeping the place locked up at night. I didn't think much of it. I had lived alone before. I wasn't scared of old houses, or creaky floors, or the occasional strange noise. But this was different. The first time I noticed it, I was in bed, drifting between sleep and wakefulness. A soft rustling inside the walls, like something moving. Slow, deliberate. Too heavy to be a rat, too rhythmic to be the house settling. I sat up, listening. The sound stopped. The next morning I checked the walls, looking for holes, cracks, anything that could explain the noise. I found nothing. No signs of rodents, no loose panels, just smooth, untouched drywall. Still, something about it gnawed at me. The feeling of being watched, of not being alone. Days passed, and the noises got worse. Footsteps in the attic when I knew no one was there. The distant creak of floorboards in the middle of the night. Shadows shifting in my peripheral vision. Then the whispering started. I would wake up to the faintest murmur, like someone speaking just beyond my hearing. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt them, low and urgent, slipping through the walls like breath against my ear. One night, I decided to test it. I whispered back, "Hello?" The silence stretched for so long that I almost laughed at myself. Then, "You shouldn't be here." My blood ran cold. The voice was right there, behind the wall. I stumbled out of bed, heart hammering, scanning the room as if expecting to see someone standing in the corner. But I was alone. I tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Sleep paralysis, maybe, a half-dream. But the fear in my gut told me otherwise. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear breathing, slow and steady, as if someone was lying just on the other side of the wall listening. The next day I called my landlord. I kept my voice steady, casual, asked if anyone had ever complained about weird noises. He went quiet for a moment before saying, "It's an old house, it makes sounds." I wanted to push him for more, but something in his tone stopped me, like he already knew what I was going to say, like he had been expecting the call. That night, I set up my phone camera, propping it against the far wall facing my bed. If something was moving in the house, I wanted to see it. I hit record, turned off the lights, and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, my phone was on the floor. The screen was cracked, the battery drained. I swore I had left it plugged in. My stomach twisted as I opened the video. The first few hours were nothing, just me sleeping, tossing, turning. Then, around 3 a.m., the closet door creaked open. I stopped breathing. A figure stepped out. It was tall, impossibly thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It moved slowly, gliding toward my bed, pausing just inches from my face. I watched myself sleep, oblivious to the thing hovering over me. It stood there for what felt like hours, then turned its head sharply toward the camera. The video cut to static. I scrambled to pack my things. I didn't care about breaking the lease, about my deposit, about anything except getting out. But as I reached for my keys, I froze. The closet door was open. I hadn't touched it. Cold fear coiled in my stomach as I forced myself to step closer, every instinct screaming at me to run. The darkness inside was thick, swallowing the dim light from the hallway. I reached for the switch, and then, from deep inside the walls, I heard it. A breath. Close. Too close. Something shifted, the drywall bulging slightly, like someone was pressing against it from the other side. My breath hitched as I stepped back, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. The wall flexed again, the shape of fingers pressing outward, tracing along the surface like they were feeling for a way through. Then, the whisper came. "You let me out." I turned and ran. I don't remember getting into my car. I don't remember starting the engine. All I remember is speeding down the road, never looking back. I didn't stop until I was miles away, parked in some random gas station lot, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I never went back to that house. I never called the landlord. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and still, I swear I hear it. A faint rustling, a whisper in the walls, and the feeling that something is still listening. Story number 4. The Forgotten Tenant. When my uncle died, the house became my problem. It had been sitting empty for years, a crumbling relic at the edge of town, the kind of place people whispered about but never dared to enter. He left it to me in his will, though I had no idea why. We were never close, and I hadn't seen him in over a decade. Still, I figured I'd clean it out, sell whatever was salvageable, and be done with it. From the moment I stepped inside, the house felt wrong. The air was thick, stale, as if it had been holding its breath for years. The floorboards groaned under my weight, and dust floated in the dim light, filtering through heavy curtains. It smelled like damp wood, and something else, something faintly rotten. I started in the main rooms, sorting through old furniture and yellowed papers. Most of it was junk, but something about the place unsettled me. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. The silence wasn't just empty, it was watchful. Then I found the door. It was at the end of the hallway, a plain wooden door with a rusted handle. What struck me was that I didn't remember it being there. I'd been in this house as a kid, and I knew it only had one floor. There was no way an attic could exist above these low ceilings. Yet the door was there, undeniable, and waiting. I hesitated before pushing it open. The air inside was ice cold, a sharp contrast to the stuffy warmth of the house. A narrow wooden staircase spiraled up into darkness. I swallowed hard and took a step inside. The boards creaked under my weight, the sound swallowed by the thick silence above. At the top I found a single room. It was small, with a low ceiling and a single barred window that let in only a sliver of light. The walls were covered in deep scratches, long claw marks that ran from floor to ceiling. In the center of the room sat a rusted metal bed frame, the mattress torn and stained, and next to it a wooden tray with a single, rotting plate of food. My stomach lurched. Someone had lived here, a tenant, a forgotten tenant. I turned to leave, my pulse hammering, but a whisper slid through the air. Low. Hoarse. Finally. You came back. I froze. The voice was coming from behind me, from the bed. My breath caught as I turned, my eyes locking onto a figure sitting in the shadows, thin, gaunt, eyes hollow, gleaming in the dim light. You left me here, it rasped.
I staggered back, my body screaming to run, but my legs refused to move. The figure shifted, the mattress groaning beneath it. The stench of rot grew stronger. I wanted to scream, to deny whatever it was saying, but the words died in my throat. "Did you forget?" It tilted its head, the movement unnatural, too sharp. "You promised you'd come back. Number I had never been here before. I had never—" Memories slammed into me, sharp and dizzying. Flashes of a child's hands locking a door, of a voice pleading, whispering through the cracks, growing weaker with each passing day. I stumbled backward, my foot catching on the step. I fell hard, pain jolting through my back. The room spun, shadows stretching toward me. The figure stood, its bones cracking with the movement. "You left me," it said again. Stepping forward, I scrambled to my feet, choking on terror. "I don't know you." It stopped. The air trembled with silence. Then it laughed, a sound dry and brittle, like dead leaves rustling in the wind.
"But I know you," it whispered. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed the room. I clawed at the wood, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The laughter twisted into a sob, then a scream, raw and endless. The walls trembled, the scratches seeming to deepen before my eyes. Then suddenly silence. The door flew open and I tumbled out, landing hard on the dusty hallway floor. Gasping, I turned back, but the attic, it was gone. The door wasn't there. No staircase, no room. Just a blank wall as if it had never existed. I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air. My mind reeled, searching for explanations that didn't exist. But one thing was clear. I had left something behind in that house, and it was still waiting for me. Story number 5. Don't answer the basement door. The first time I heard the knocking, I thought I had imagined it. A slow, deliberate rap against the basement door. I was home alone, curled up on the couch, the glow of the TV flickering in the dark. The sound was so faint I almost dismissed it, but then it came again. 3 knocks. I muted the TV and held my breath. The house was silent. Too silent. I glanced toward the basement door at the end of the hallway, my stomach twisting. It was locked. It was always locked. My mom had made sure of that. "Never open that door," she had warned me since I was a kid. No matter what you hear, no matter who calls for you. I used to think she was just paranoid, that she didn't want me playing on the old rickety stairs, but I was 16 now, and the way she still insisted on keeping it locked, on never even speaking about what was down there, felt strange. The knocking came again, louder this time. I stood up slowly, my pulse hammering against my ribs. My phone was on the table, and I grabbed it, hesitating. Should I call someone? The police? My mom? My fingers hovered over the screen, but then, a voice. Software muffled, coming from the other side of the basement door. "Let me out." A chill ran down my spine. It was a child's voice, small, fragile. I took a step closer. "Hello?" Silence. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Maybe it was a trick. Someone had broken in. Maybe a kid from the neighborhood got trapped. But that didn't make sense. The basement had no windows, no entrance, except this one door. The voice came again, trembling. "Please, it's so dark." My hand shook as I reached for the lock, and then, just as my fingers brushed against it, I froze, because I remembered something. When I was little, I had heard this voice before. I had forgotten, buried the memory deep. But now it rushed back like ice in my veins. I had heard this same small, desperate voice when I was 6 years old. Let me out. I had gone to the basement door, just like now. I had almost opened it, but my mom had grabbed me, yanking me away with a force that scared me more than the voice itself. "Never answer," she had hissed, locking the door again. "It isn't real." The knocking turned into pounding. The voice grew more frantic. "Please, I don't want to be here anymore." My breath hitched. It sounded so real, so human. I backed away, my heart hammering. Something wasn't right. The door had been locked for years. My mom was the only one with the key. And yet, the voice never aged. It had sounded like a child when I was 6, and it still did now. I clamped a hand over my mouth as a new sound echoed through the silence. Scraping. Something dragging against the wood from the other side. Slow. Deliberate. The voice whimpered. "It's waking up." I bolted. I ran to my room, slammed the door and locked it. My breathing was ragged, my hands shaking too much to text. My mind screamed for me to leave, to get out of the house, but my body was frozen in fear. Then, silence. Minutes passed. An hour. I sat curled in the corner, listening, waiting. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "Do not open the basement door, no matter what it says." I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. She knew. She always knew. A soft knock echoed from the hallway, not from the basement door, from my bedroom door. I stopped breathing. A voice spoke, muffled through the wood. Mom said not to open the basement door, but she never said anything about this one. I never moved out of that house, but I never opened a door without checking twice again. Story number 6, The Phantom Tenant. The first complaint came from the man in 2B. He called late at night, his voice hushed but urgent. "Someone's screaming in the apartment next door," he said. "It's been going on for an hour." I sighed, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. It wasn't the first time I'd gotten a noise complaint about 3A. It was supposed to be vacant, the last tenant having moved out months ago. I'd been meaning to check the place out, make sure everything was in order, but I kept putting it off. "Are you sure it's coming from there?" I asked. "Positive. Can you just check it out?" I told him I would and hung up, pulling on my jacket as I stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The building was old, the kind of place that always smelled faintly of mildew and dust. As I approached 3A, the air grew heavy, thick with something I couldn't place. I knocked once. Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. The screaming stopped. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the keys in my pocket. Every instinct told me to walk away, but I couldn't ignore it, not if someone was hurt. I slid the master key into the lock, twisting it slowly. The door swung open. The apartment was empty, completely untouched. No furniture, no belongings, nothing but a thin layer of dust covering the floor. I stepped inside hesitantly, my footsteps echoing in the hollow space. The air was stale, as if the windows hadn't been opened in years. Then I saw it, a chair, the only piece of furniture in the entire apartment, sitting in the middle of the living room, facing the far wall. It hadn't been there when the last tenant left, I was sure of it. The room felt colder now, the air pressing against my skin like a warning. I took a step closer, my breath fogging in the stillness. The chair creaked slightly, as if someone had just been sitting in it. I turned to leave. That's when I heard the whisper, a soft, breathy voice, right against my ear. "Did you bring the rent?" I spun around, my pulse hammering. The apartment was still empty, but the chair, it was facing me now. A chill ran down my spine. My heart pounded as I backed toward the door, my mind scrambling for an explanation. I reached for the doorknob, but the second my fingers touched it, the door slammed shut on its own. The whisper came again, closer this time. "You owe me." The lights flickered, the air turning frigid. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as I pressed against the door, shoving it with all my strength. It wouldn't budge. Behind me, the chair scraped against the floor, inching forward. I wasn't alone. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering under my breath, praying, begging. The pressure in the room grew unbearable, the whispering turning into low, rasping breaths, then suddenly silence. The air shifted. The weight pressing against my chest lifted. I opened my eyes. The chair was back in the middle of the room. The door creaked open. I didn't hesitate. I ran, slamming it behind me, my hands shaking as I locked it tight. My breaths came in ragged gasps as I stumbled down the hallway, not stopping until I was back in my office, locking that door too for good measure. I didn't go back to 3A after that. I should have called someone, an exorcist, a priest, even the cops. But I didn't. A week later, the man in 2B moved out without a word. A month later, someone else rented 3A. The next day, he was gone. His things were still there, the front door left wide open, as if he had just walked out and never returned. The apartment is vacant again, but every so often I get calls about the screaming, and every time I ignore them. Story number 7, the night shift visitor. The night shift at the hotel was supposed to be quiet, boring even, that's why I took it. A few late check-ins, some drunks stumbling in after the bars closed, but mostly it was just me and the hum of the monitors in the security room. It was my 3rd week on the job when I first saw her. She appeared on the lobby camera around 2 a.m., an old woman in a long black dress, walking with slow, deliberate steps. Her hair was long and white, trailing over her shoulders. Her posture was stiff, unnatural, like she wasn't entirely sure how to move. I frowned and leaned closer to the screen. I hadn't heard the front doors open. She moved toward the elevators, pressing the button. I waited for her to check in at the desk, but she didn't. That was already strange. Only guests could use the elevators. I switched cameras, watching as she stepped inside and pressed a floor number. Room 306. I grabbed the register, flipping through the list. That room had been empty for years. After a guest had died there under unpleasant circumstances, the hotel had stopped renting it out. The manager never explained why, just muttered something about bad history and left it at that. My stomach twisted as I watched the screen. The elevator doors slid open, and the old woman stepped out into the hallway of the 3rd floor. The camera outside 306 caught her approaching the door, stopping just before she reached it. Then she turned her head. Not toward the door, toward the camera, straight at me. A chill ran through my body. She stared, unmoving, her face expressionless. Then, so slowly it made my skin crawl, she lifted one hand and knocked on the door. 3 times. I waited, breath held, expecting nothing to happen. But then, the door opened. No one was on the other side. She stepped inside and the door shut behind her. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering. That wasn't possible. The room was locked. I had checked it myself just last week. No guests, no staff, no key cards even assigned to it. I picked up the phone and called my coworker, Tom, who was patrolling the upper floors. His voice was groggy when he answered. "Yeah? Tom?" I whispered, eyes glued to the screen. "Can you check room 306? A pause, then, "Why?" "Just humor me." I watched as his flashlight beam appeared in the 3rd floor hallway camera. He walked toward 306, stopping in front of the door. He knocked once. Silence. Then he tried the handle. It didn't budge. "It's locked," he said. "You didn't see anyone go in?" "Number Y, who's in there?" I hesitated, my throat dry. No one. Tom grumbled something about me wasting his time and headed back down the hall. I stayed in the security room, staring at the screen, waiting. An hour passed. Then the door to 306 opened. The old woman stepped out, but this time she wasn't alone. A shadowy figure moved behind her, taller than her, its shape wrong, its limbs too long. It followed her into the hallway, its body flickering in and out of view like a glitching image. My fingers tightened on the desk. The woman turned toward the camera again, staring, her face eerily calm. The thing behind her didn't look. It didn't need to. She stepped back toward the elevator. The shadow followed. I fumbled for my radio. "Tom, are you near the elevators?" Static. The woman pressed the button. The elevator doors slid open. She stepped inside and the shadow melted into the walls. The doors closed. I switched to the lobby camera, waiting for her to appear. She never did. I checked every screen, every hallway, every exit. She was gone. The next morning, I told the manager what I saw. He went pale, then shook his head. "You're not the first to see her," he muttered, "but you're lucky." "Lucky?" I echoed, my voice hoarse. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "She only takes the ones who see her first." I quit that night, but sometimes when I stay in hotels I still check the security cameras just to make sure she isn't there, watching, waiting. Story number 8, the reflection that stayed. I woke up in the middle of the night with the unmistakable feeling that something was wrong. The room was dark, the air still, but something felt off, like the space itself had shifted in a way I couldn't explain. My heart pounded as I scanned the room, eyes adjusting to the dim glow of the streetlights bleeding through the blinds. Then I saw it. The mirror. It stood across from my bed, an old antique piece left by the previous tenant. I'd never paid much attention to it before, but tonight something was different. My reflection was standing. I was still lying down. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind scrambled for an explanation, but there wasn't one. The figure in the mirror was me, but it wasn't. It stood still, watching, its posture eerily stiff. My chest tightened, every nerve in my body screaming at me to look away, but I couldn't. Then, slowly, my reflection tilted its head. I shot up in bed, heart hammering. My real movement seemed to jolt the reflection back into place. Now it mirrored me again, shifting as I did. But the wrongness lingered, pressing into the room like something unseen was holding its breath. I turned on the lamp. The warm glow flooded the space, chasing away the shadows. I stared at the mirror, waiting, searching for any sign of what I had just seen. But it was normal now. Just a reflection. Just me. I laughed, but the sound was thin and forced. "Lack of sleep," I muttered. "Just a trick of the dark." Still, I turned the mirror to face the wall before lying back down. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, but as I got dressed, a strange unease crept through me. I glanced at the mirror, now facing away, and my stomach twisted. It felt like something was on the other side, listening. I left for work and tried to shake the feeling, but throughout the day I couldn't stop thinking about it. By the time I got home, the paranoia had settled deep in my bones. I hesitated before unlocking my door, a small, absurd fear gnawing at the edges of my mind. I stepped inside. The mirror was facing the room again. I stopped cold, the air rushing from my lungs. I had turned it. I knew I had. Something was wrong. I forced myself forward, my hands clammy as I gripped the edges of the frame. Slowly I turned it back toward the wall. The weight of unease pressed heavier on my chest, but I ignored it. It had to be my imagination. That night, I woke up to the sound of glass tapping. My stomach dropped. The mirror. The room was bathed in darkness, but I knew. I knew it was facing me again. I could feel it. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking as I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, landing on the mirror. It was facing me, and my reflection was already looking back. I hadn't lifted the phone yet. I was still lying down, but the reflection, my reflection, was holding its phone up, staring straight at me. The air in my lungs turned solid, a thick, suffocating weight that kept me from screaming. My reflection's lips curled into a slow, unnatural grin. Then it stepped forward. The glass didn't break. It didn't shatter. It rippled, like water disturbed by a single drop. The reflection placed one hand against the surface, pressing outward, the glass bending beneath its palm. I bolted. I didn't stop to grab anything. I didn't stop to think. I ran out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the street, my breaths coming in sharp, ragged gasps. I never went back. I had the landlord pack my things. I made up some excuse, but I didn't care if he believed me. I just wanted out. But sometimes late at night, when I pass by mirrors in places I don't know, I swear I see it. A version of me that lingers just a second too long, waiting. Story number 9. The Doll That Knew Too Much. I found the doll in a box that should not have existed. It was buried deep in my mother's attic, tucked beneath yellowed newspapers and forgotten photo albums. I almost didn't see it, but when I brushed the dust away, there it was, small, delicate, its porcelain face cracked along the edges. A pair of glassy blue eyes stared up at me, framed by golden curls matted with age. I recognized it immediately. It was my sister's doll, the one we had buried with her. My breath caught in my throat. That wasn't possible. I remembered the funeral. I remembered my mother sobbing as they lowered the casket, the doll cradled in my sister's still hands. It had been with her. It had to be. I stepped back, my pulse pounding, Maybe it was a different doll. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But as I picked it up, I saw the tiny heart-shaped birthmark painted just below its ear. The same mark my sister had drawn there when we were kids. This was hers, and it was here. I almost put it back in the box, almost left it buried beneath the past. But something about it pulled me in, a lingering, desperate nostalgia. So, against my better judgment, I took it home. That was my first mistake. That night I placed the doll on a shelf in my bedroom. It stared blankly ahead, its glassy eyes reflecting the dim glow of my bedside lamp. I turned off the light and lay down, telling myself it was just an object, just a memory. Then, sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up. A faint whisper slid through the silence, just on the edge of my hearing. I held my breath, heart pounding. The air felt thick, suffocating as I strained to listen. The house was still. The only sound was the slow, rhythmic ticking of the clock on my nightstand. And then, very softly, very clearly, the whisper came again. "Why did you leave me?" My stomach turned to ice. I sat up, my eyes darting around the room. The door was closed. The windows were locked. I reached for my phone, fumbling with shaking hands as I turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the shelf where I had left the doll. It was gone. The air pressed heavy against my chest as I scanned the room. Then my eyes landed on the floor. The doll was sitting upright, facing me. I swallowed hard, every nerve in my body screaming at me to move, to run, to get out. But I couldn't. I was frozen, trapped in the thick, unnatural silence. Then, slowly, the doll's head tilted. "You forgot about me." I gasped, scrambling backward, my pulse thundering in my ears. My mind raced, searching for an explanation, any explanation. But there wasn't one. The doll had moved, and it had spoken. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I kept every light on, watching the doll from the corner of my eye, waiting for it to move again, but it didn't. At dawn, I grabbed it with shaking hands and stuffed it into a garbage bag. I ran outside, barely able to breathe, and tossed it into the dumpster behind my building. My hands trembled as I slammed the lid shut, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. It was over, or so I thought. That night I returned home, exhausted but relieved. I double-checked the locks, turned on every light, and finally, for the first time in nearly 24 hours, allowed myself to relax. Until I walked into my bedroom and saw the doll sitting on my pillow. I choked on a scream, stumbling back, my vision tunneling. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I had thrown it away. I had seen the dumpster close over it. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I forced myself to move. I grabbed the doll again, my fingers tightening around its tiny frame, and this time I didn't hesitate. I drove to the river. The entire way there I could feel it watching me. Its lifeless eyes burned into my skin, its presence thick and suffocating. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I parked at the edge of the bridge, my knuckles white as I gripped the wheel. Then, without giving myself time to second-guess, I got out, ran to the railing, and hurled the doll into the water below. I watched as it hit the surface, sinking instantly into the dark, rushing current. I waited. Nothing happened. No movement, no whispers, no impossible return. I let out a shaky breath. It was over. But when I got back home, my front door was open. I stepped inside, cautiously, my heart pounding. The lights flickered as I moved through the apartment, my breaths shallow and uneven. And then, in the center of my bed, waiting for me like it had never left, was the doll. Its lips curled into a tiny, knowing smile. "You can't get rid of me. I don't live there anymore, but no matter where I go, no matter how far I run, the doll always finds me." Story number 10. Never blink twice. I first noticed it at work. It started small, so small that I thought I was imagining things. A flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. I would turn my head, but there was nothing. Just empty space. It happened once or twice a day, enough to make me feel uneasy, but not enough to question my sanity. Then, one afternoon, I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, something had moved. It was just a few inches, barely noticeable. A coat rack that had been in the corner was suddenly closer to my desk. My coffee mug was turned slightly, the handle facing the wrong direction. I frowned, shaking off the unease, telling myself I had simply misremembered. But the feeling stayed with me, a sense of something watching, waiting. That night, at home, I caught a glimpse of it. I was brushing my teeth, staring at my reflection in the mirror when I blinked. And in that fraction of a second, when my vision was swallowed by darkness, I saw something standing behind me, tall, shadowy, stretched too thin. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. The bathroom was empty. The air was still. My breath came in short gasps as I turned back to the mirror, searching for any sign that I wasn't losing my mind. And then I blinked again. It was closer. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over the sink. My chest tightened, my mind racing for explanations that didn't exist. I kept my eyes open as long as I could, forcing them to stay wide, but they burned, begging for relief. I clenched my jaw, swallowing hard. Then, without thinking, I blinked twice, and that was the mistake. In the space of those two blinks, the figure was no longer in the mirror. It was standing right in front of me. I didn't see it move. I didn't hear it. But it was there, looming. I bolted. I ran out of the bathroom, nearly tripping over my own feet. My vision blurred with panic as I stumbled into my bedroom, slamming the door shut. My breaths came in ragged gasps, my mind screaming at me to wake up, to snap out of whatever nightmare this was. I didn't dare blink, but my eyes burned. The sting was unbearable. I had to keep them open, had to. My vision blacked out for half a second. When I opened my eyes, the door was unlocked. My stomach dropped. I hadn't touched it. Then from the corner of the room the darkness shifted. Something was there, waiting. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on nothing. An empty corner. But I knew. I knew it wasn't empty a second ago. I forced my eyes to stay open as I backed toward the bed, my body trembling with exhaustion. The seconds dragged on like hours, my vision blurring, my lids growing heavier. I needed to sleep, but I couldn't. Because every time I blinked, it got closer. I don't remember passing out, but when I woke up, it was morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows, chasing away the shadows. My body ached from exhaustion, my eyes raw and dry. For a moment, I convinced myself it was just a dream, a stress-induced hallucination. Then I looked at my phone. The screen was cracked. The flashlight app was still open, and in the corner of the room where I had shined the light last night, there were footprints, not leading toward the door, leading toward the bed, toward me. I left that apartment the same day. I packed what little I could, not stopping to rest, not stopping to think. I didn't care where I went, I just needed to get out. But the thing is, I still see it. A flicker in my peripheral vision, a shifting shadow where there shouldn't be one, and when I blink twice, it moves closer. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. But tell me, have you ever experienced something truly unexplainable? A shadow where there shouldn't be one? A whisper in an empty room? Share your horror stories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the other terrifying stories appearing on your screen right now. You might just find one that keeps you up tonight.